everyone. Very warm welcome to this amazing venue here in Concert Noble in Brussels. Thank you all for being here today for this presentation of the European election campaign for EFA party. I'm Laura Pous, I'm a journalist. I will be moderating this event tonight, and we will be presenting some of the candidates that are running in this election, as well as some of the party leaders that are with us tonight. So we're going to start explaining a little bit what's EFA, but I'm sure many of you already know what EFA is, so it's pretty clear, but don't worry, I won't ask you to come up here and tell us. I've been doing my own research. I've been talking to EFA party leaders and EFA organizers, and they've told me EFA obviously is the European Free Alliance. It's the only party in Europe that clearly defends the right of self-determination of all peoples. And it does so since the first European election campaign, the first European elections in the EU. The party aims to be the voice of stateless nations in Europe, of minorities and also regions. So this involves that EFA supports all kinds of proposals to allow people to express themselves and find their own institutions in a democratic and always peaceful way. What do they mean by that? I've been asking. So that this means EFA does not only support the right to achieve independence through a democratic referendum, what we saw, for instance, in Scotland or in Catalonia, but also all kinds of proposals to respect linguistic and cultural rights, the evolution, the expansion of regional or federal powers, and demands for more autonomy. These are, obviously, most of you know, not easy times for the European projects. Journalists that report about the European Union know it. We are all the time discussing about it, especially those that report day to day on Brussels affairs. The European project is lost, to say the least. It lacks a clear vision, and most European parties running in this election stand trying to explain what their vision, what their project for this new Europe of the 21st century is. So I've asked EFA, what is your vision? What do you stand for in Europe? And their answer is this: they want to change the European political project. They believe that the Europe of the all nation states no longer satisfies the democratic demand of Europe's peoples. But does this mean that they stand for going back to small national projects to lose all European sense of identity? Well, not at all, they've told me. EFA defends, in fact, a truly diverse and united Europe, where national and regional identities can go hand in hand with this European identity that we all share. For EFA, Europeans shouldn't be afraid of the right of self-determination. In fact, they should embrace it, they told me, as part of the project, because they see Europe as a community with a shared destiny where everyone can feel that they belong to this community, and different voices, but especially including those of the regions and the peoples that don't have the power of a state behind them, are not ignored, so they are also heard. But well, I suspect this is not the easiest of the tasks at the times that we are living, obviously. As most of you might know, Jean-Claude Juncker, the current president of the European Commission, once said, "I don't want to see a European Union with 100 member states. It's complicated enough at 28, 27 pretty soon." Well, I put this same very question to EFA leadership, and they told me, well, first of all, why not? Who is he to decide how many member states should there be? But in any case, they remark, self-determination doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to end up with a European Union with 100 member states. It is based on the idea that all the peoples should have the right to choose their own destiny and the institutional framework that empowers them, and this can go from full independence to just more autonomy to all the grays in between. But in fact, most of the answers to these questions are explained in the EFA manifesto, which is here, and we are going to discuss it in a little bit. It was approved by the General Assembly of EFA in 2008, and it sums up all these proposals that they stand for. Before going into detail about this manifesto, I would want first to present you some of the candidates and also some of the leaders of EFA that are here tonight with us. So I will ask, please, to come up here and sit with us. Diana Riba from Ara Repúblicas, Esquerra Republicana, and let me say that Diana is here standing on the name of his husband, Raúl Romeva, and his party leader, Oriol Junqueras. Both, let me remind them, both are in prison, and she's also taking the challenge to represent them in this election, so thank you. Jordi Soler from Ara Repúbliques Esquerra Republicana. Ana Miranda, Agora Repúbliques BNG. Ana Miranda, Agora Repúbliques BNG. We also have with us Marc Demesmaeker, the MVA, Asita Kanko, MVA, François Alfonsi, Région et Peuple Solidaire, Jill Evans, the Plate, Florian Weber, the Bayern Party, Miroslav Mitranovno, Latvian-Russian Union, Adam Price, Plate Camru, Pelo Urizar, Euskal Kartasuna, Csaba Feher, Hungarian Christian Democratic Alliance, and Scholz Zgali, Hungarian People's Party of Transylvania. So thank you all for being with us today. We are going to discuss a little bit because they are presenting this manifesto. They are running in this election with this manifesto. I've read it, and it says that you defend a Europe for all the peoples, and that in this context, it says all peoples of Europe have to be able to freely choose their destiny, that EFA presents a plan for peace and freedom in Europe, claims for more sustainable and green policies, defends linguistic justice and gender equality, propose social justice to stop any kind of discrimination, and promotes a more democratic and solidarity Europe, which young people are involved in all decision making. It's all explained in the manifesto, but instead of going point by point to the manifesto, which I think it will be very boring and you can all read about it, I would like to invite Jill Evans, the Vice President of EFA, to come here and we can discuss a little bit about the challenges of this campaign. We have a microphone that is coming right away. Thank you. So thank you very much, Ms. Evans. All polls suggest that this next European Parliament is going to be probably one of the European parliaments with more parties, more fragmented. The big parties will lose their traditional majority. So what does EFA offer that is different for citizens? What a difference can really you make to voters that are potentially thinking about voting?
Well, is this on? Yeah?
Should be on.
The manifesto that you all have is a very, very exciting manifesto with our ideas for the future. And you know, I first came to Brussels in the early 1980s to an EFA meeting. And I was very young, and I came for the first time. And what EFA offered really inspired and enthused me. The vision that EFA offered of a different kind of Europe, of people working together in friendship and in partnership, but offering people the right to determine their own futures. And no one else was doing that. Now, I went back home and decided I wanted to play my part in achieving that ambition. And I did become an MEP, and I have been for 20 years now. And I can tell you that I'm just as inspired by what EFA is offering today as I was all that time ago. It's a real, not just paying lip service, but giving real respect to human rights, to diversity, and to equality.
Mm-hmm. Self-determination is one of the core values of this manifesto, but also, for instance, linguistic diversity. But we have seen, for instance, in the European Parliament, you are a Welsh speaker, but you are not allowed to speak Welsh in the European Parliament. And if we are honest, the EU has been quite silent, to say the least, on the issue of self-determination of different peoples. So can really a stronger EFA make a difference, can reverse that trend? What can you really do?
Yes, I believe we can. That's why we are here. We all believe we can. And if it's only EFA that's been keeping these ideas on the European agenda of self-determination, of our right to decide on our own futures. And that's been really important. But we have to go further than that now. We have to make sure there's a much wider debate on a European level about democracy within the borders of Europe as well as in other countries throughout the world. And language is integral to that too, of course. I've worked since I came to Parliament for equality for all languages, and that's what we want. Europe has to speak to people in their own languages if Europe is to improve, if it is to become more responsive and democratic and open, and that's what we work for. Every language is equal, not just some languages that are decided are more equal than others, and that's what EFA really represents.
Mm-hmm. In the manifesto, you also say that EFA defends a plan for peace and freedom in Europe, and that the priority must always be to solve conflict with dialogue. But it takes two to tango. So what to do when we are seeing sometimes some examples in Europe? What to do when one part doesn't want to talk or doesn't engage in such a dialogue?
Well, as always, we repeat that dialogue is the way forward. We oppose all kinds of oppression, all kinds of violence. We want to work in peaceful partnership with all of our neighbours and friends. But we see today a totally unacceptable situation where our friends, our colleagues, fellow politicians are on trial, imprisoned for doing what the people of Catalonia elected them to do, which is calling a referendum on independence. Now, we have to make sure that Europe changes. These issues cannot be left to governments alone. The European Union, if it has an important role to develop in the future, it is that they look at democracy and what democracy really means. What we have now is a Europe of the states. And this situation can only arise within a Europe of the states. The Europe of the peoples that we want to build would, I believe, never allow this kind of situation to develop. So we are working to a Europe of the peoples where the voices of the people of Catalonia are heard just as loudly and clearly as the voices of people anywhere else.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mrs. Evans. Well, the plan of EFA for this campaign can also obviously be checked online in the current times. I've been told EFA has launched a new website for this campaign that we're going to see pretty soon. It's a website at www.youdecidenow.eu. So EFA invites you all to see this website. There is all kind of information if you don't want to read the paper manifesto, but in any case, you also have examples of this paper manifesto in the room if you prefer the traditional ways of reading in. And for those of you that would prefer even a quicker summary of what EFA stands for, here is the website with all the examples of the manifesto, Jordi Soler's letter in the website, and there are some videos as well in this website for those that are more lazy and want a quick example in 40 seconds. We're going to see one of these videos, one on self-determination that they are going to just show you in a minute.
The concept and implementation of the right to self-determination is well known in the history of Europe and the world. The citizens of stateless nations have often used this right to democratically express their will and to take responsibility for their own future. This is self-determination. Exercising this right can lead to many different outcomes. All democratic options, from integration within a state to full political independence and creation of new states. Essentially, self-determination means a people have the right to determine their own future. The right to define and choose their own political status, the form of the constitution or government, and the form of economic, cultural, and social development. The right to self-determination is one of the fundamental principles of international law, recognized as a right which belongs to peoples, not to states or governments. The Article 1, Paragraph 1 of the Charter of the United Nations, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights state that all peoples have the right of self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social and cultural development. This means enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms, be they civil, political, economic, social or cultural, can only be reached if the right or self-determination is respected. Self-determination is an absolute democratic right which completes and guarantees the implementation of human rights. The importance lies in the right to choose, the right to decide. The European Free Alliance stands for human rights, the right to decide upon your own future, the universal right to self-determination, stronger regions and stateless nations in Europe. A Europe of the peoples. The European Free Alliance stands for another Europe. And you?
To tell us a little bit more about self-determination, you have seen that we have here a declaration on self-determination. Is a declaration that right now the leader of PLAID, Adam Price, will present to you, and at the end of the event all the leaders and candidates will sign, but I will invite now Mr. Price to talk to you.
It's a wonderful hall, so
try with this one.
After all, the European Free Alliance is all about making our voices heard. So how about this? It's said that the last words uttered by the great French writer André Gide were, "I love small nations. I love small numbers. The world will be saved by the few." We live in a time in which Europe and democracy itself is in crisis. And so now it does fall to us in the small nations to hold up a mirror in Madrid, in Paris, in London and Berlin, of an Europe that could be to the Europe that is. Every election has at its heart a choice between different parties that represent different paths. But maybe in this election, we face an existential choice. We must decide which Europe we want to be. The Europe of remote and unaccountable power, or the Europe of diverse and deep-rooted democracy. In classical analogy, it's a choice between being Greece or being Rome. It was the tiny city-state of Athens that gave the world a transformational idea, that we can best shape our lives in shaping it together. And for democracy to flourish, it cannot be built in the abstract. It has to be at the human scale, where people are connected in places with a history and culture that helps us understand where we've been and what we might become. That's the idea at the heart of the declaration we are making this evening at the start and the heart of our campaign. Self-determination is our Europe's foundational idea and a fundamental right for all Europeans. Because if we cannot determine ourselves, then we are condemned to be prisoners of our fate, not authors of our destiny. For some of our comrades, that is now literally true. There is a war raging between the Europe of power and the Europe of peoples. And incredible as it may seem in 2019, this battle has now literally produced refugees and prisoners of war. But tonight we say to those who would deny our self-determination in Catalonia, in Corsica, or when we hold our own independence referendum within the next decade in my own country, you can imprison a man, but you cannot imprison an idea. You can exile a woman, but you cannot banish a dream. We are all Oriol. His fight even with or without the mic, we are all Oriol. His fight and his fate is all of ours and all of Europe's. For democracy denied to one people is democracy denied to all. His liberation and that of Catalonia would be the catalyst for a continent-wide wave of democratic change. He is a candidate for all of Europe, but a radically different Europe to that of today. A predecessor of mine, as leader of Plaid Cymru, Saunders Lewis, was sent to prison in the 1930s by the British state for defending both our own culture and the integrity of international law. He was tried in Carnarvon, in the north of our country, but when a jury of Welsh men and women refused to find him guilty, they moved the trial to London. Even David Lloyd George, the Welsh-speaking Welshman who ended up as British Prime Minister, was moved to say this: they yield when faced by Hitler and Mussolini, but they attack the smallest country in the kingdom which they misgovern. This is a cowardly way of showing their strength through violence. This is the first government that has tried to put Wales on trial. I should like to be there, and I should like to be 40 years younger. The young in all our countries will no longer accept the denial of our democracy and the deferral of our future. And by young, I mean those not just in age, but in spirit too. Like the 90-year-olds outside a polling station in Barcelona who would not go home until they had voted, as they said they had been waiting for this moment all of their lives. Our goal is a modest one, but we cannot renounce it. Though you place us in chains, real or metaphorical, we want to be ourselves, together. We want to be free, and sooner, not later, we will.
Well, thank you very much, Adam Price, the leader of Plaid. Let's move now to what is actually the theme of tonight's event, the Spitzenkandidaten for EFA. As you know, each European party designates its candidate to become the next president of the European Commission, and this time EFA has decided to do so as well and present its own candidate. That is why I would like to give the floor now to EFA's president, Jordi Soler, who will give you all more details about that.
Dear friends of the great family of the European Free Alliance, I am addressing you here this evening as the president of EFA. As the president of a party which unites 45 members, each representing a different reality and ultimately the true diversity of Europe, the peoples and nations that define our dream, our ambition, our goal, the peoples of Europe. We demand recognition and respect for each of those peoples and regions and stateless nations, And we recall the need to acknowledge the incredible richness and diversity we represent, the necessity to protect the different cultures, identities, languages, the importance of living and sharing our vision to the world, and the importance of living all together in a united and strong Europe. Without EFA, without our voice, too many voices would remain silent. The true diversity of Europe wouldn't be visible. EFA's common denominator, the cornerstone of our project, is the principle of self-determination. The right to decide on our own future is the precondition for respect of the basic human rights, the basis for a peaceful and fraternal coexistence. We want to put this principle on the table of the European institutions. We want a European Union that clearly backs this universal right. For this right is not being respected. Too many countries still violate it, among them Spain. The criminalization of political ideas and the outrageous prosecution of political leaders and representatives is a stain on the democratic values Europe portrays. Dear friends, it's time for us to make our voice heard. The European elections are for us a unique opportunity to vehicle our message to all corners of our continent. The General Assembly of the European Free Alliance is gathering these days here in the capital of Europe to define our roadmap for the European elections and to stand behind a lead candidate that will convey our message throughout Europe. And I'm very happy, I am delighted to publicly announce that this very afternoon we have unanimously appointed Oriol Junqueras as our Spitzenkandidat. Our friend Oriol is paying a high price for peacefully and democratically defend the right to self-determination. He symbolizes the importance of keeping up the fight to defend fundamental rights of all citizens, of all peoples, of Europe, of all of us. I'm going to read to you now a letter from Oriol. This is the voice of Oriol, a man who is deprived of his freedom, but whose voice will never, ever be silenced, no matter how hard they try to silence him. His voice is our voice. This is the letter that Oriol has written for all of you. He says, "Dear all, thank you for being here today. I send you my words from the prison of Soto del Real in Madrid a few weeks after the beginning of an unfair and shameful trial, which frontally attacks the fundamental pillars of democracy and that radically denies one of the fundamental rights to any people, the right to self-determination. This situation strongly contrasts with the idea of a rich and diverse Europe, in which its peoples build together a project of unity and political cooperation. Since the first direct elections of the European Parliament, the European Free Alliance has been the voice of all peoples in Europe who are fighting for the recognition of their rights. Because of this, and because I think that democracy is always the best defense against repression, I have decided to make a step forward as the European Free Alliance lead candidate in the upcoming European elections. I see my candidacy as the best way to denounce and oppose the repression that Spain imposes on us, Catalans, but also to show that we continue to defend the freedom and diversity of all peoples in Europe, the rights of minorities, stateless nations, and regions in Europe. Dear friends, let me share with you my reflection on the Europe we live in and that of the Europe we actually want to build, a Europe of all peoples. Throughout the last decades, the Western world has made efforts to build institutions that are socially and economically inclusive. These institutions aimed at turning heterogeneity into virtue and difference into opportunity. That's why the European Union has the potential to act as a unity, as a bigger project, while preserving the specificities of its peoples and nations. In the last century, Europe suffered terrible wars that left wounds still difficult to heal. There have been periods in which differences were persecuted with the ultimate goal of achieving a homogeneous and uniform society that would extirpate any kind of political dissidence or criticism. Unfortunately, we are once again experiencing that the discourse of fear is weakening our democracies. Populist, reactionary, xenophobic, and misogynistic messages are undermining the legitimacy of democratic institutions. In such a situation of political disorientation and lack of clear references, media often normalizes this dangerous political narrative. The recognition of plurality is a fundamental requirement for the construction of a peaceful and socially just Europe. And with your support, and bearing in mind our historical responsibility, I will bring forward our political commitment to freedom and justice, because we have an ethical duty to defend an inclusive and integrating model of society that opens doors to everyone. I am very concerned about the situation in some European countries where the extremist parties are no longer marginal, but have become decisive forces in government. The humanitarian drama in the Mediterranean Sea, the constant violation of civil and political rights, the dismantling of the welfare state, the increase of inequality, or the hate speech towards minorities are just some of the worrying effects of these reactionary policies. My goal, and that of the European Free Alliance, is to build another Europe, one that is sustained on the principles of freedom, justice, subsidiarity, and diversity. A Europe that will put the focus of its policies on its peoples, a Europe for all peoples. We want the European Union to be a free, open, and diverse space. We want a European Union that allows a relationship of fraternity with the rest of the people of this planet. A welcoming Europe that leaves no room to racism, gender-based violence, or fascism. A democratic European leadership that enhances the economic prosperity, social justice, equal opportunities, and transparency at all levels. A European Union that guarantees the rights and freedoms of all European citizens without exceptions. The time has come for the European Union to become the guardian of solidarity, tolerance, democracy, and fundamental rights. We appeal to all those who believe in this inclusive model of society, which is the fruit of the struggle of many generations and that has led us to enjoy the highest levels of equality and well-being in history. And now, on your behalf, I will defend more than ever these democratic and progressive values so that the European Union understands that only by defending the right of peoples to decide upon their own future, the democratic future of Europe will be guaranteed. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be EFA's Spitzencandidate, for assigning me the crucial task to defend the idea of a Europe of all peoples in the campaign towards the upcoming European elections. I feel privileged and truly honored for the trust you have put on me. Moltes gràcies, Oriol Junqueras.
My micro is not working? It's not? I'll use this one, it's okay, we have plenty of microphones. So, Jordi, maybe you can be here so the cameras will have you with Oriol. This is a pretty symbolic move by EFA to elect Oriol Junqueras as the candidate for this election, to recognize a leader of a political party who is currently in prison. What do you aim to achieve with this?
You know, I remember very well back in 2009 when Oriol was the lead candidate of our coalition to the elections to the European Parliament. At that time, he was not that much known as he is now. And he used to begin all of his speeches by saying, "Hello, my name is Oriol Junqueras and I am a good person." And I'm sure that if he had the opportunity now, he would say, "Hello, I am Oriol Junqueras and I am a political prisoner." As he said just 3 weeks ago in the Supreme Court, he said, "I am a historian, I am a politician, but currently I am a political prisoner." So the lead candidate of EFA is a political prisoner. And we don't want a European Union with political prisoners. We don't want a European Union where politicians, democratic people, peaceful people, are in jail just for letting people vote. This is not the Europe we stand for. So, Oriol, pretty much against his own will, has become a symbol for the defense of fundamental rights, of democratic rights, of civil and political rights in the European Union. Because, as you know, his situation is not just a particular situation. His lack of freedom concerns not only those that are in favor of an independent Catalonia, that concerns all Democrats in Europe, But he's also a victim of the regression in terms of democracy, in terms of fundamental rights that we are seeing in some places, in many places, in too many places indeed, in the European Union. So by appointing him as our lead candidate, we want to denounce this regression and we want to say, EFA will be always here. We will be opposing those forces that want to erode our democracies, our fundamental rights, and we will fight for these rights. And who can do it better than Oriol?
A second question I would like to ask, I'll use this one again. Party candidates, the European party candidates to this lead position in the European Commission get the chance to participate in debates, electoral debates, but your candidate is currently in prison and we don't suspect the Spanish Supreme Court would allow him to get out before that. So would you want to demand an empty chair in these debates? Would you use a replacement to speak for him? How would you do that?
You know, Uriol has been around 500 days in pretrial detention, in prison without freedom, but he has his full political rights. So he can stand in elections, he can contest elections. So we will do everything that will be at our hands in order for Uriol to be representing EFA in the debates, in the interviews, and whatever. Because, as I said, we will never give up defending our rights, our individual and collective rights. And it is the right of Uriol to participate in the campaign. It is the right of Uriol to defend all of us. He didn't commit any crime, and he has to defend our values and the Europe we stand for. So we will do everything possible to have him in the debates, in the interviews, and so on. If this wouldn't be possible, we'll think about other options, but our first option, our first scenario is to get Uriol free, to get all the political prisoners free, to get all the exiles back home, because they never, ever committed any crime.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you all as well for attending. That would put an end to our event tonight. I hope that it helped you understand how this campaign is going to work, the big highlights of the campaign, and it's definitely going to be an interesting one for everyone. Please, I invite you, all the candidates and leaders, to sign the declaration, and I think afterwards there'll be a group photo, so, well, wait for that, and thank you all very much for attending.